Okay, hey everybody. Today we're going to continue what we were talking about on Monday. And on Monday, this is a quick recap. I went through things to really think about, things to consider as you're putting together your presentation, your capstone non-technical presentation, as well as a little bit into like things to include on your readmes. Today I might go back and talk about more about like readmes and what to do there. So today instead we're going to focus on curating your GitHub profile such that it is more, I guess, attractive to an employer. So just to start, there are many different parts of your profile. This is what mine looks like, not the cleanest, but I'll use this as an example to just like talk through different things that you want to note. So I'm going to talk about two main sections. First of all, this profile page, as well as a little bit of like more notes as to what to do with like each repo. What's one of my repo examples? Let's pull up maybe this one. Okay. So to start with this profile, I think I won't be typing my notes as I usually do. I actually have these notes somewhere already, and I'll just like fit in at the end of this session. All right. So with this profile page, a couple things that your career coach will also tell you. On your profile page, you should have a profile picture. It's just good practice to like have an employer, I don't know, see your face, I guess. Your career coach will tell you to add a profile picture as well. So you got to do that. Next up, your top projects. So on GitHub, they allow you to pin up to 6 top projects. I'm not sure if they've changed the number, but I believe it is still 6. And you can decide like which 6 you want to do. We've only done 5 projects, but it is not uncommon for people to, work on other projects after graduation. So if you worked on something cool that you want to share, you can do that too. You don't have to have 6. If you customize the pins, you can choose between all your different repos. You can also like search specific ones. And then you can also reorder them in a specific way. I don't really have like a particular like rhyme or reason for like my order of my repos, but yeah. So you can choose up to 6 projects to pin on your repo. That's like just a really good quick way for someone seeing your profile page to see what projects you've worked on. Things that are pretty cool is like, it tells you what technologies you're using or what languages you're using. So this is one that was mostly written in Python scripts. This one was also like a very Python script one. And the rest are Jupyter notebooks, like what we do with our projects. As you see here, the things that someone will see are the title. So again, same as what I mentioned last time, try and give your project like a meaningful title. If I could go back, I would actually make the titles a little bit more consistent. I haven't really had the need to do that myself because I haven't really been job searching for a while, but I would have liked to make my project titles a little bit more consistent. Like I don't even know what this is. And yeah, I would like to have some sort of system for naming my projects. That's me personally though. And then same as I mentioned last time, the project description. If you remember, this is what I talked about here. If you do like an about, you want to have a good description such that someone from here you can see what your project's about. I would say this could be very similar to what you write under your resume for your project, in terms of like not the bullet points, but like the 1-line descriptor of your project. I think that's like a good thing to make consistent or to match. So yeah, those are your pinned projects. I think that's like a really important thing. If anyone were to Google you, that's something that you can check as well. If someone Googles you, my GitHub profile actually comes up when you Google me. And so this, if someone's just like randomly searching me up, this is something that they see. I guess as a tangent to that, when you Google yourself, I don't know how like common / not common your names are. Mine is not very common. So my stuff actually does come up. And I've sort of cleaned out things that I don't want people to see, like social media. Another thing that's pretty interesting is Medium comes up a lot, like my blogs. So I've just also like worked on curating those so that, they look good. All right. From your profile, I think it's a good idea to put at least your LinkedIn, just so that someone can, it's just easier for them to like navigate to find out more about who you are. Especially if this is the first place that they go to. That could be something that you do. And then the next thing I want to talk about is contributions. So contributions, you all started this program in like July. And what this is, it basically shows how much you're interacting with GitHub. For me, I have pretty consistent contributions because I upload study group notes on a weekly basis. So most weeks I have at least one contribution. But I think it's a good idea, especially if you're job searching, to show that you're like actively doing something on GitHub. Some students have made it a thing that while they're on their job search or while they're after they've graduated, just going in and like making some change to some repo and making a commit. Not everything that you do counts as a contribution. Like for example, I know that in some people for their end of mod projects, they they fork and then clone the repo. And if you do your git push to that, I don't think it counts as a contribution. So I think it only counts as a contribution if it's your own repo, which is why I encouraged a lot of you to like, instead of, just cloning that project repo, creating your own from scratch, just so those contributions count. So keep that in mind. I will say this is definitely not a deal breaker for employers. Like there are definitely people who have like no history and then still get jobs, but it's just a good thing to see that you're, working on stuff consistently. Some tips on keeping your contributions up doesn't mean that you have to be working on a project every day or every other day or every few days. There are other ways that you can get contributions. As an example, something that I was doing for just a little bit is doing GitHub issues. I forgot if I mentioned this in the past, but I think it's good to say again now. For each of your projects, for your own project repos, you can do GitHub issues. And issues, I sort of like to use it as like a checklist of future work things that I want to do. And each issue that you add counts as a contribution. So I did this, like a year ago now. All I did was I just wrote an issue. I think I just did new issue, wrote like what I wanted to do there, and it actually counts as a contribution. So if you don't feel like coding that week or something, maybe just going back and thinking about what do I want to add to my project in the future and document that on your GitHub. I mean, it's a really good place to just document the stuff that you want to do, because sometimes, if you haven't seen a project in months, you forget what you can do to work on it. You forgot where you were. So that could be one thing that you can also do to, just at least keep track of what you want to do with your projects. And it also counts as a contribution. So that's one thing that you can definitely do. I forget if it is still currently a requirement for career services and your job search process to like have a certain number of commits per week. If it is, yeah, use this. They don't discern between like a git push versus an issue. So you can use this as your, to count for your commits. Questions about this so far? All right, let me just look at my notes real quick. Cool. Other things that are a little bit less important, but if you want to like build your GitHub following, feel free to follow me, follow each other on GitHub. I don't know like who really looks at that, but I feel like it doesn't look bad to have more followers. I'll follow you all back if you follow me on GitHub. Just have like your number up. Things that will also count towards your, I don't know, this number, for example, here. I have 6 stars. That means 6 random people have starred my repos, which I don't know why they start my repos, but if you want to like star each other's repos to help each other get that number up, sure. But that's like just like a little bit of like the gamifying social media aspect of GitHub. Less important for sure. The main thing I want to focus on here is keep your contributions like fairly consistent. I think like once every 2 weeks is good enough, or not good enough, but it's like a good like benchmark number. Yeah, and then the darker the green, the more activity on that day. And then yeah, just to recap here, I really think that for your pinned repos, make sure that the titles and the descriptions are clear and indicative of what your project really is. Questions at this point? All right. So there's a question right before this from Edward talking about what do we do with all those learn repos? So here you can see I have 616 repositories, which for most people who didn't go to Flatiron School, it's a lot. The thing is, if you don't go in and pin specific repos, I think GitHub automatically just chooses, like, I think the first few labs that you forked to be your pinned repos. So careful of that. You definitely don't want to have a lab as a pinned repo. You really don't want to have that. So as you can see, I have a lot of like the DSC blah, blah, blah as my, as like that make up my 600 repos. And sometimes some people don't like it. I honestly think that like, as long as you pin your repos, no one's going to look at all of your other repos. So maybe you don't even have to go through the trouble of like cleaning them out. But if you do want to clean up your GitHub profile, there are a couple scripts that exist. I'm going to look for them. They exist somewhere in the Slack channel in like a public channel. So I'll look for those scripts. Some of them are written in like Selenium. And if anyone has used Selenium here, it's basically that it's a library that is sometimes used for web scraping, but basically it allows you to like control your mouse and keyboard. And so some Flatiron students have actually built bots to delete your repos for you, anything that has like a Flatiron School, like DSC, whatever. So you can use that. I'll look for those and see if I can find those for you all. Other than deleting your entire lab, deleting all of your labs, because it is having your labs on GitHub, because GitHub is a free place to store your work. It's, I guess, in some ways a little bit safer than having it locally, just because, it's a copy on the cloud on the internet. But another thing that you can do is you can actually create an organization on GitHub, on your profile. So if you do like plus organization, you can just maybe do like your name -Flatiron as an example, and you can actually transfer repositories into an organization. I haven't done this, but what it will look like is, this is an example. This is an organization created for like a hackathon that I did. And then so this project only shows up within this organization, and it won't show up on your own profile. So that's another option that you can do. If you want to give yourself a mini project, maybe you code your own script to do that, but the scripts exist somewhere and I'll source it for you. If I can't find it, I'll let you all know as well. But I do think as long as you have pinned labs, the labs won't clutter your profile page. As you can see, like I have all of my labs from like when I was a student two plus years ago, and they don't show up on my profile anyways. Because also if you like get rid of the repositories, it gets rid of your contributions, if any of your contributions were from a specific repo that you deleted. That's something that's good to know as well. Questions or comments on that?
Hey, Ish.
Hey, Kishore.
Yeah, just a quick question. Can we, how do we transfer our report to the projects and
to the organization?
Yeah.
Good question. I have not done it myself, to be honest. Let me see. I think if you do it in settings and then you can, let's see, transfer ownership to an organization. And I think you just go down here, go to transfer, and then you say to where. And so like that Selenium bot basically has you like look for all of your repos that have like DSC something, something, something. Because here you have to type the name of the repo. So it does that as well for you automatically. So it's one of those things I think you have to like leave your computer running that in the background. So yeah.
And can we rename the profile name?
Oh, that's a good question. I think so. I think you should be able to. Let me see. If I go into like account settings, maybe. I'm pretty sure. Let's see, not here, maybe an account. Yeah, you can change your username.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Because with my current ID, nobody will be able to find me.
Yeah, that's a good thing to note as well. I think like, I think usernames is not the biggest deal, but if you want to be more easily found, you definitely want something that has your name. All right. Anything else? Okay, So next I'm going to be talking about some things to just be aware of with an individual project repo. So in this project repo, some things that you should know, especially now that we are like closer to graduation. Something that I talked about, and usually in our project reviews, I talk about this too, is organizing your files. As you can see, this is one example where, I mean, it's really up to you what you think is the best way to organize your code. I personally like to work off of multiple notebooks. And so I know, Henry, you do this as well. I like to number my notebooks so that's a little bit clearer. And I like to name them something that, you know, people will know what part of the data science process is in each notebook. So I do this. If you have just like a lot of notebooks that have, you know, relevant material, I highly, highly recommend that in your README, either at the top or the bottom or somewhere clear, just say what material is in each notebook. So if someone wants to take a look at like your data cleaning code, they know exactly where to go. And you can also hyperlink your notebooks in your README too, if you want to make it even easier to access. So this point is basically like, you don't want to have like a lot of just random files around. Things that are pretty common are like screenshots or images, especially ones that you put in your README. You want those to be in like an images folder probably. I like to have an archives folder because I think a bunch of you would do as well. I like to have just scratch notebooks. So I have like my old notebooks there. If I have multiple data files or like pickle files, I put them in folders as well. Basically, you want to have it very clear where someone would find your code and your work. Also, something to note is that I don't believe all of you do this, but a git ignore is pretty important. If you're seeing files like IPYNB checkpoints, like dsstore, basically any of those like PyCache kind of files where those are like your computer's auto-generated like cache files, put them in your git ignore because they do take up space on your repo and you don't want that to kind of clutter up the files that exist in your repo. If you have those files there, you can delete them off your local computer, you can delete them off of here, and then just add them to your git ignore. The git ignore that you can use that encompasses most of these is the git ignore on the study group repo. So if you want to like copy and paste a git ignore for your own project, this is the exact same one actually. I use the same git ignore for everything. Feel free and copy and paste this into your git ignore. And if your project doesn't have a git ignore file yet, you can actually just create that in, I think you can create that here. I think if you do like add file and you create a new file, and then if you name it git ignore, and you see it automatically pops up, do you want to use a git ignore template? And you can look up Python and it'll auto-generate this for you. The one that I use and the one that's on the study group repo actually is this auto-generated one with some stuff added to it. So as you can see, this one ends at like, I don't know, Pyre, I don't know what that is, but on the ones that I use and the same one for the study group repo, I've added a couple other things that Python one doesn't have, such as, if it would just load, I think one of them is like dsstore is something that wasn't originally there to begin with. Here. Yeah, so there's, I've added stuff from here, I think. I added dsstore, IPYNB checkpoints, your config file, especially if you use any like APIs or if you have passwords. Yeah, just make sure that's there. Yeah. Cool. So one other thing that I didn't really talk about before, but I think going forward, especially if you are going back and like making edits to your existing projects, which you should do, because especially like if you go back to like your mod 2 project, I'm sure that there's a lot that you know now that you would like to add and make your mod 2 project 2, 3, 4 projects better. One thing to note is your commit history, especially if your project says added files via upload, which I know some of you didn't. I mean, as a student, that's fine. But moving forward, you want to get your commit history going for, especially the projects that you want to put on your resume. Commit history is just a really, really good, or not commit history, but like the practice of committing and pushing your work shows that, you know, one, that you can work with a technology like Git and GitHub, but also it shows that, you're iteratively working on stuff. The fact that you can always find things to work on and improve, that's something that's good to see. So for example, with this project, I have 22 commits. So, and I can go back through like my commit history and see like what were the things that I was doing. And even myself, like I didn't want to mess with GitHub when I was first starting out. This is when I was still a student. I also added the files via upload, but then as I was going back and making edits, I made sure that I got my commit history up. And also remember that your commit messages should be meaningful. That's just something else to note. If you want to see like an example of what are not meaningful commit messages, and I will say this one, I know that I had not meaningful commit messages because I was actually working on pushing this to like, I was pushing this to a front end. It kept messing up. So I have a lot of really bad commit messages that I've actually had people message me and say like, what was that? So be careful. Cool. Regarding that, I'm going to be talking about front ends next week. So look out for that. All right. That's pretty much it, honestly, with regards to like things to be aware of with regards to your GitHub profile. I kind of talked about like the Readme before as well. Readme is also, this is a very, very recent change to Readmes on GitHub. I think this happened in the last 2 weeks. They added this really neat function where you can actually like go straight to a specific section in your Readme. And it's done automatically as well. So if you think that you want to utilize this, just make sure that your Readme headers are useful and indicative of what's in each section. So maybe you want to use this to plan out how you want to lay out your Readme. Let's see. Anything else? Any questions?
Would we ever want to put our presentation links into Readmes as well?
Mm-hmm. I do think that a presentation is good to have in your repo, whether you have it as like a PDF in here somewhere in these like within these files, or you link directly to it in your Readme. I think either works. If you want,
So
if you really, oh yeah.
So if it's in Google, if it's like in Google Docs or Google Slides, we can make a PDF out of it and then re-upload it as a Readme or something.
That's right. Yeah. Or if you just want to drop like your Google Slides link, that works as well. You can just say like, you can hyperlink your slides here as well. Yeah, I will say like when I was a student, non-technical presentation was not a requirement. So therefore I don't have slides. But yeah, I do think that like having your slides is a really good, concise way to explain your project. So if someone were to like look at your slides, they would be able to get a quick understanding of what you're doing. Again, depending on like your slide style. I know some people's slides, I think out of you all have like kind of similar, in which I know there are some presentation styles that like are very light with content on the slides. So those maybe would be a bit less helpful. But if you have like, explanation and results on your slides, I think that's good to have. All right, let me just review and make sure that I mentioned everything I want to say. Okay, one thing that I wanted to mention with regards to Readmes as well, things not to have. I would say things not to have on your Readme and things that would come off a little bit less professional is if you have blocks of uncommented code. So let's say, especially if you take like a screenshot of like your Jupyter notebook page and you like throw that into your Readme, to begin with, that's fine. But you can actually do like Readme code blocks. So I would rather you do that instead of screenshot your Jupyter notebook. It just comes off a little bit unprofessional. So if you really want to share like a specific function or code that you wrote, and honestly, most of the time in your Readme, it should not have much code unless the code is very, very pertinent or important to your project. And maybe your code is like some really important fancy function that you use in your project a lot. I don't think you should have much code in your Readmes to begin with, but if you do need to put code in your Readme, use the Markdown code block. So Markdown code blocks, I think you wrap it in like triple backticks or something like that. And it will look like, yeah, it literally will look like this. A lot cleaner than a screenshot from Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter's screenshots in general are just discouraged. I would say that like sometimes you want to put like a confusion matrix or like a graph of EDA, that's okay. But if you're like screenshotting, be careful to not include like, you know, the code execute number. Don't include like, I don't know, like maybe part of another cell. Try to make it as clean as possible if you're doing like a screenshot of like your graphs. Careful not to like just have clean screenshots if possible. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. I'm going to stop the recording here. And let's talk about, oh, hold on.